What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history of happenings you've never learned. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to the show. And for some reason, we seem to have all of a sudden picked up this incredible buzz and hum, and I'm not sure where. Oh, there. I found the solution. Okay. All right. That's the solution right there. All right, so we fixed our audio with the magic touch here. Welcome to our show. It's Thursday, January 18th, 2018. Sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday. We've got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The talking points list is very full. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And for those of you who visit the website, whatreallyhappened.com, yes, we are up on the new server. The good news is it is blazingly fast, along with being immune to the Spectre and Meltdown back doors. The bad news is, of course, with the upgrade, it broke a lot of stuff on the website. I've been busy trying to fix a lot of it this morning. Chat room still isn't working. And I'm basically at the point right now of making a decision whether I should invest more time and effort in the current site or just bite the bullet and start a whole new whatreallyhappened.com website because I put a lot of years into this code, and it's very frustrating to have to solve the same problems over and over and over again, to be told I have to upgrade, and the upgrade will be smooth, and it wasn't. The upgrade won't break your site. It did. And just all kinds of problems here. So the problem I'm having is I'm looking at the content management systems out there, and they've all evolved more toward e-commerce, selling stuff. And I have yet to find a content management system and a template that duplicates the functionality of whatreallyhappened.com. In other words, it's a news site, a blogging site, commenting site with membership. But at this point, I think I've taken this site as far as I can, and I'm up against the law of diminishing returns. Okay, so anyway, let's get into the news here. A couple of quick items here about what happened in Hawaii with that false, they say, missile alert. At this point, I really do think they were testing how the public was going to respond here in Hawaii and over in Japan. That's the only reason there were two of these similar events just days apart. But apparently, according to the Daily Mail, a well-known porn site basically revealed that right after the ballistic missile threat was revealed to be a false alarm, there was a 50% increase in traffic from users in Hawaii. So I guess people were celebrating in the best way that they could. On a somewhat darker point, of course, we've got more information about that gentleman who apparently was so frightened by the missile alert that he suffered a heart attack and died. Sean Shields, 51, he basically sent messages to his daughter and son to say goodbye, and then he suffered this heart attack, and he had no prior history of heart problems. So that is not very good. All right, let's take a phone call. Michael Herzog, aloha. Welcome to our show. What's on your mind?
How you doing, Michael Rivero?
I'm doing great.
You know, I hope Claire's getting better. I wanted to ask you, I had something come across my computer screen here regarding this Hawaii, this false alarm. And and I wanted to see if you've heard anything about this. It says there was a missile, perhaps fired by Israel. The government is lying. Update 3. Separate Pacific Command missile warning. Tour boat witnessed ocean impact. Did you hear anything about that? It says it was reported to Channel 2 and then scrubbed.
I have heard several variations of this same story, and I'm not giving them a lot of credence at this point. And the main reason for that is, had the Pacific Command actually issued a real missile warning, the siren system would have gone off, because in addition to the cell phone and TV banners, they just set up this new nuclear attack warning siren system. And the reason I was wondering what was going on right at the very start was because the sirens did not go off immediately, and there was nothing on the local news that I could see, news radio, and it was just this one area. 1 out of 3 was giving this alert. So I really don't give it a lot of credence. Somebody was saying that the missile actually crashed into the ocean off the North Shore, was seen by a bunch of tourists, but there are a lot of people who live on the North Shore, and there should have been additional reports. I think this is the usual trying to muddy the waters so that people, can't really try and figure out what actually happened.
No, I would agree. Okay, thanks a lot. I appreciate the answer, and give Claire my best, and I hope she gets better quick, man. Have a good show.
I certainly will. Okay. Thanks an awful lot. Thanks for the kind words. We're going to switch over to Kevin in West Virginia. Aloha, Kevin. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mr. Mike. I keep hearing a couple reports about Trump having heart problems, heart disease, and a possible heart attack later down the future. And I was thinking when I heard that, well, didn't it come out in the Pike Committee in the church hearings or the Pike hearings that the CIA has a heart attack going?
Yes.
And it just had to be awful funny and kind of fishy, and wanted to bring that to your radar. If they're pushing this, they also have the technology to cause people to have heart attacks. So maybe there's something nefarious here, or I'm just reading too much into this. But I just wanted to bring it to your attention.
Well, first of all, Trump just had his medical check. The doctor said he passed with flying colors. He passed his cognitive test. And what's really amazing is how the media is obsessing over Donald Trump's health. This is the same media that wouldn't even comment when Hillary Clinton couldn't focus her eyes, when she was basically unable to climb stairs without assistance, when she literally passed out during that 9/11 memorial. And they gave her a clean pass. Oh, it's no big deal, no big deal, she's going to be fine. And Donald Trump is out there just incredibly healthy. I mean, Donald Trump is the same age as Bill Clinton. You should see them side by side if you want to see healthy versus unhealthy. And but again, this is more of the media trying to set the stage for Trump's removal. And whether they're actually contemplating inducing a heart attack. Yes, there was that gun that they presented to the church committee, although at the time they said it was a Russian weapon. Even back then, anything bad, the Russians are doing it. There are just chemicals that you can drop on somebody's skin that will stop the heart. And no, I'm not going to tell you what it is. So, yeah, there's all kinds of things. And, maybe they'll try something like that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's funny that you bring up Bill Clinton in comparison. I mean, absolutely, you're right. He looks like a walking corpse. I mean, if I've never ever seen a Grim Reaper, that's it right there. I mean, that's what I envision. But no, I just wanted to bring that to, your attention. I mean, I'm not trying to throw conspiracy out there, but I just found it to be quite, unnerving that they would say that, especially when he just had that, that exam, like you said, the cognitive exam, and a clean bill of health from the doctors, and now they're pushing off, heart disease, and then my head girlfriend had brought up to me, well, didn't you say the Pike Committee or the Pike hearings? And I was like, well, yeah, they did. And I just see them trying to play something. I hope they don't, but I just see them trying to play something. But other than that, I hope you have a great show. Give Miss Claire the best, and you have a great day, sir.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call, and I will. And we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. And, yeah, it's stunning, the hypocrisy here. The same corporate media that is taking a president who just passed his medical exam and his cognitive exam, and they're trying to just keep on hinting, he's too ill to be president, he's too ill to be president, and yet all last year during the campaign, Hillary Clinton was showing clear signs of problems. There was that Fresnel lens inside her eyeglasses, unable to focus her eyes, maybe indicating brain damage. There was the way she literally couldn't walk upstairs without help. She couldn't even stand on a soapbox without somebody holding and propping her up. And then there was that time when she literally passed out and had to be thrown in the car. The corporate media said nothing. No big deal. She's fine. You guys are just imagining things. And it just underscores how biased the corporate media has become. And yet, if you try and say they're biased and not being objective, oh my, that's just fake news. That's just fake news. We're still leading, the way in the country. And no, they are not either. Interesting little story. This gets back to Seth Rich, and he's sort of indirectly back in the news, because there's this gentleman who's investigating his death, Jack Berkman, and apparently, according to the Daily Mail, was basically, this happened yesterday, was grabbed by three men, masked, in his driveway, punched and pepper sprayed. It was clearly meant to be a warning. So obviously, the opposition is in fact getting very, very nervous. They can't keep a lid on all the scandals. That was going to be Hillary Clinton's job in the White House. Keep the lid on all the scandals until it's so old nobody cares anymore. That's why they hate Donald Trump. He can't be controlled. Well, he's being controlled to an extent, but they can't depend on him. They understand that if he actually gets something hard on these people, he will move to break free of his controllers and reassert his vision for the White House. Now, the FBI is out there just desperate to find all kinds of stuff. Some good is some bad. Right now, part of the FBI is investigating millions of dollars of mishandled tax money funneled from the Australian government to the Clinton Foundation. It's some $88 million in total. And basically, it happened during Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard's last year in office. So something was going on down there. Now, on the other side of the FBI, the bad people, apparently a senior FBI official actually shared Russian probe intelligence with the author of that dossier, Christopher Steele. And Christopher Steele has a lot of contacts left over from when he was a British spy, and he basically called them all up and basically said, we're working on Trump's connections to Russia. And it turned out an FBI agent revealed the name of Trump campaign volunteer George Papadopoulos to Christopher Steele on October 1st, 2016, during a meeting in Rome. So why is the FBI sharing intelligence with a former British spy about an ongoing investigation? Something very questionable about that. Now, report over on Fox News from contributor Sarah Carter reveals that the Clinton Foundation's hatchet man, Sidney Blumenthal, was grilled by the FBI in 2016 in connection to the Steele dossier. Now, last November, remember, Hillary Clinton actually admitted on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah that her campaign paid for this now discredited document. So she's in it up to her eyeballs. Tom Fitton is warning that there is a tsunami of information set to expose the Obama-Clinton deep state scandals. And repeating statements that he made on Hannity last week, Judicial President Tom Fitton warned on Tuesday that a tsunami of information exposing all of these scandals will soon be released. Now, one of them may already be out, because Tom Fitton has come on out and said that Hillary Clinton was hiding everything, meaning all of her deleted emails, on her private server. She deleted emails off her State Department account and everything. She kept copies on her private server. Somewhere that is out there in a backup tape. In theory, the NSA should have it all. No question about that, if they're actually able to do what they claim they're able to do. If they don't have Hillary's deleted emails, then we can all relax. They can't really break into our computers and spy on us, can they? Yet another major scandal is starting to surface. This is going to rival Uranium One. A lot of people are, looking at the Uranium One scandal, but there's another one. Because apparently there is a Gulf tanker port over in Cape Canaveral, Florida. And basically, this port, there was a 35-year lease given to one of America's largest container ports, located just minutes from the Kennedy Space Center, to a Middle Eastern company with ties to Iran, North Korea, Russia, and the man behind Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons programs. And it's exactly the same players involved in the Uranium One deal. The same people signed off on this 35-year lease on this container port that signed off on Uranium One. So now we have to be looking at the money that was coming into the Clinton Foundation from these various interests, this Middle Eastern shipping company. Boy, they were just selling the country left and right when they were in power, weren't they? 20% of America's uranium, major shipping ports, all of it's for sale. Now, over at the White House, the big news here right now is there going to be a government shutdown this weekend? And normally I'd say that'd be a good thing, but last time they had a government shutdown, all they shut down were the things the American people actually wanted. And the stuff that the American people don't like kept right on running. But the White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, earlier today said the GOP has enough votes to avert the shutdown. And then later in the day, there was some talk that maybe there were going to be some desertions. And so it's still a little bit up in the air. Now, I would have thought that after all the problems that came on out with this book, Fire and Fury, that Michael Wolff would sort of be gone. But apparently the book is so good, even though it's not true, they're going to make it into a TV series, despite the concerns of accuracy. Now, if they present it as a work of fiction, that's one thing. But if they're using TV to try and reassert that this actually happened in the Trump White House, that's another problem. That's another case of clear corporate media propaganda. But apparently, production company Endeavor Content has bought the rights to the book for a 7-figure fee. This is the largest deal in the company's history, and will soon look for a network to help produce the show. Michael Wolff is going to serve as one of the executive producers on the series, alongside longtime Channel 4 and BBC executive Michael Jackson. Now, the accuracy of many of the claims in the book is widely disputed, and Wolff is basically saying early on that looseness with the truth is an elemental thread of the book. In other words, it's okay that he's lying. He actually out there saying, yeah, there's a lot in the book that isn't true. It just sounds good. And now they're going to do the same thing with the TV series. They're going to put it on out there and imply that it's the truth and say, we'll let the Americans make up their own mind, counting on the fact that the majority of Americans won't do any homework and due diligence to see if it's real. They'll just see it on TV and say, yep, I guess that's what it is. One of the things that has been very obvious about the power of, first of all, movies and later on TV, is if people are seeing it, they're more inclined to think it's real and true. And there's been a lot of nonsense put out in movies that actually come to be believed by the general population. Urban legends and so forth. And we know the movies lie, we know the TV lies, and now they're going to lie about Fire and Fury. Getting on back to the FBI is now so desperate to find something on Donald Trump. They're investigating whether Russia donated money to the National Rifle Association in order to help Donald Trump. They're literally grasping at straws. Russian straws, but they're grasping at straws here. Okay, now, finally, after much waiting and brouhaha, Donald Trump announced his fake news awards. Turns out there isn't a little trophy to go with them, which is okay, because I wouldn't imagine these media outlets would put it on display. But the winners of the 2017 Fake News Awards, number 1, the New York Times' Paul Krugman, who claimed on the day of President Trump's landslide victory that the economy would never recover. Second place goes to ABC News' Brian Ross chokes and sends markets in a downward spiral with a false report. Third place, the bronze. CNN falsely reported that candidate Donald Trump and his son Donald Trump Jr. had access to hacked documents from WikiLeaks. There's a list of 11 of these, and of course all of them center on Russian collusion. The corporate media as a whole has been pushing Russian collusion for a year, despite an absolute lack of any evidence whatsoever. So you can find this article at whatreallyhappened.com, and you can read the rest of the awards. But it's CNN, Time, Washington Post, CNN again, Newsweek, CNN again, the New York Times. Interestingly enough, Fox News did not make the cut. I imagine they're feeling pretty good about that right now. And again, the corporate media created this problem for themselves, and I have no sympathy for them whatsoever. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And a listener just emailed me that there actually is a trophy that goes with the Fake News Awards. It's a gold-plated statue of Brian Williams. Now, a little bit of good news. Remember Ben Swan? Who was just right up until the start of 2017, was just all over social media. and it had his wonderful reality check investigative reports. And then all of a sudden, a lot of people decided they didn't want him around during the first year of Trump's presidency. And basically, he went dark on his social media accounts, and they were all suddenly deactivated. Well, he's coming back. And apparently he's coming back somehow thanks to the Dash cryptocurrency. Maybe he succeeded in buying in and making a bunch of money with which to fund the return. I don't really have those details. I'm just glad as heck that Ben Swann is coming back because he just did absolutely wonderful, wonderful work. I remember some of the shows that he did, the reality checks that he did when we were talking about gold repatriation to Germany. And he was able to just really clarify the point of why Germany was so upset with the United States. All right, let's get into the war zones here because there is a lot going on. Turkey has now launched its first ground operation. This one is actually in northern Iraq, and it's a land operation against the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party in northern Iraq. And they're saying their aim is to prevent the PKK militants from threatening the border security of Turkey. So they're working across there. Everybody's just sort of holding their breath for Turkey to start moving into Syria. Actually, they already have. I was looking at a situation map, and it's already underway. They're bombing, artillery. There's at least one tank assault underway. Syria is warning they will try to shoot down Turkish jets if they attack the Kurds in Syria's borders. I thought Syria was going to back off, but apparently not. And meanwhile, Erdogan is out there issuing a warning to Russia to not oppose the assault. In other words, he's telling Russia to stand down. And Putin might. He doesn't want to escalate this. He doesn't want to let the U.S. get into it, except, of course, the U.S. is already in there with that 30,000-strong so-called border force that was there to carve out a new Kurdistan from part of Syria, which obviously Syria is opposed to that. But we're in a very bizarre situation here because we have two NATO allies now opposing each other. We have U.S. allied Turkey attacking the U.S.-backed forces in Syria. And this is where war gets really kind of confusing. Back in 2016, there was a situation where 3 U.S. allies were fighting each other in northern Syria. Don't you miss the good old days when there was the good guys and the bad guys and they marched off to each other and they did what for with their spears and pikes and halberds and so forth? It's getting very confusing here. You know, what day of the week is it? It's Tuesday. Oh, I'm supposed to be shooting Kurds if it's Tuesday. I shoot the Syrians if it's Wednesday. Now, Rex Tillerson is out there basically declaring that the United States troops will remain in Syria. Their excuse is to prevent the rise of Daesh, the resurrection of Daesh. Well, frankly, Syria and Russia have done a really good job of making sure Daesh is not coming back anytime soon. If anything, the U.S. got in the way. But that's the official excuse for the U.S. to continue their illegal presence inside Syria. And Tillerson is out there saying that another reason for the U.S. to remain in Syria is to counter Iran. Well, again, Iran has the permission of Syria to be there, just like Russia. Syria wants them in there. They do not want the United States. We had that comment from the Syrian military. They're getting ready to kick what's left of the American forces out. And down here, Tillerson says the United States will remain in Syria until certain conditions are met, which include the complete destruction of ISIS. That's all pretty much done. Assad's removal from power and the return of refugees to a stabilized country. Notice how they're back to Assad must go. They're still pushing that one. That was the original agenda all along. And everything else, ISIS, Daesh, Al-Qaeda, that was just an excuse to try and placate a war-weary American people who are saying, why are we spending our money and our children's blood running all over the world making messes of these other countries when there is so much to do here at home to fix this country up? And a lot of people are saying the same thing. It doesn't really make any sense. Former British ambassador to Syria, Peter Ford, was interviewed by Sputnik and basically says the U.S. plans to prevent Syria's stabilization as a sovereign state. They're in there to wreck the place. If they can't put a puppet government in, they're just going to smash it all up. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Tulsi Gabbard. I'm really liking this lady. She's a congressman from right here on the island of Oahu. And she basically came on out saying Washington must stop spending tax dollars to fund regime change wars. And this, of course, is a shot across the bow of the war hawks. And she's basically out there saying it's time to vote to end the foreign entanglements. Unfortunately, she's up against the majority of Congress, who I presume are heavily invested in war stocks, and the more wars they can start, the more money they themselves will make. And you need to remember Tulsi Gabbard, she's a veteran. She served a one-year tour in Iraq as a field medic, so she knows what it's like to be out there. And I agree with her. Look at how our nation is deteriorating. We're in a wartime economy. Almost everything that's there is being spent on war, and the nation is falling apart. They're leaving us ordinary citizens enough to keep us content, keep us from rising up. But that's a wartime economy. Okay, now Iran has stated they will not allow any changes to the P5+1 deal on the nuclear program. And basically saying if Washington quits the deal, Tehran will quit the deal as well. That it's an all or nothing. You either accept the deal as it is right now, or it's completely off. And of course, this is in response to Donald Trump, who is repeatedly criticizing the argument, saying it's not broad enough, it's not wide enough, and it needs to include long-range ballistic missiles, so that when the U.S. decides to invade Iran, they can do it relatively easily. That's what's behind all of this disarmament talk. When you're talking about disarming weapons of deterrence, and that's what nuclear weapons and long-range ballistic missiles are, they're weapons of deterrence. You cannot attack my country without my being able to cause harm in your country. That's it. When the United States was building the world's largest nuclear arsenal, they justified it saying, this is a deterrent system. Nobody will dare invade our country because of what we can do to them. And we have seen this repeated pattern over the last several years of convincing a nation to surrender the development of weapons of deterrence, followed by an invasion. Libya, Iraq, Syria, soon to be Iran, almost on the edge of North Korea. That's really what's going on here. Now, here's a story that came out of Blacklisted News, and it's basically saying that 15 years after the invasion of Iraq, U.S. and British oil corporations start to flaunt the spoils of imperial conquest. Remember, all the way back when that was happening, and I said, it's about the oil. It's about the oil and what currency it is being sold for. And apparently the British oil and gas company, British Petroleum, has won the contract to operate the Ramallah oil field. They actually got it back in 2009, and they're now boasting of their new drilling capabilities on Twitter. So I think at this point we can say the real winner of the war in Iraq is British Petroleum. It's all about that oil. All about that oil. Do you realize that if the U.S. government had taken all the money they have spent to conquer and control or regime change the oil-producing nations and actually put it into new energy research, like a new Manhattan Project scale operation, we probably would have accomplished something really great by now. Certainly would have got thorium cycle reactors going, found out whether there's really anything to cold fusion, because the Army labs think there is. They don't think it's fusion, but there's something going on there. could have gotten hot fusion going. Who knows what all else is out there? But they didn't want to look because it's easier to pick up a rock and bash your neighbor in the skull and take their oil. So, now over in Korea, this Olympic detente is upsetting the U.S. strategy on North Korea. The U.S. has been pushing this thing, North Korea is a threat to South Korea. North Korea is a threat to South Korea. We're allies with South Korea. We have to come in. We have to give them THAAD missiles. And all of a sudden, North Korea and South Korea are making buddy-buddy. They've had a lot of discussions at this Peace House, and out of it so far have come some very powerful symbolic gestures. The first is that the North Korean and South Korean Olympic athletes are marching as one team under one flag. We don't know what that flag is going to look like. It won't be the existing flag of either North or South Korea. But what a powerful symbol of reunification. And it may be that both North Korea and South Korea do not want to have a repeat of the start of the Korean War, where they all suffered hugely, especially North Korea, at the hands of the U.S. They could very easily walk on out of that Peace House and say, guess what? We're going to reunify. Problem's over. Take your THAAD missiles and go home. The threat of a new U.S. invasion on the peninsula may actually get them past the hurdles to reunify. And, of course, that would just yank the rug out from under the U.S. Efforts to get in North Korea, because they're building weapons of deterrence. They want to be able to stop us from invading them, and we can't allow that to happen. And U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson is going the other direction. He's out there snarling at North Korea. In fact, if you look at this article I'm talking about, there's a photo of him, and he literally looks like he's snarling into the camera, saying either negotiate or we'll take military action. Now, of course, what Rex Tillerson means by negotiate is you do what we tell you. Because any negotiation from the U.S. side ends with North Korea surrendering its nuclear weapons and its long-range missiles. And North Korea is not going to do that, because they saw what happened when all these other countries surrendered their nuclear weapons and long-range missiles. Libya, Syria, Iraq, they got invaded. And the whole point of the exercise from the point of view of Kim Jong-un is not to be invaded. Meanwhile, in another sign of an impending military adventure against North Korea, the U.S. has deployed an EC-130H Compass Call aircraft. Now, this is an aircraft capable of scrambling communications in the air to disrupt communications between enemy aircraft and their command center. It also has some very powerful surveillance capabilities, and some people have speculated it may be used to collect data on North Korea's military during the Olympic Games, which will begin on February 9th. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I guess they couldn't collect data on how many nuclear weapons North Korea has, though.
Well, I imagine by now Kim Jong-un has dispersed them. However many he has, and I don't think it's a lot, but it takes only one nuclear bomb to wreck your day, as we learned last Saturday, or almost learned last Saturday. But I imagine he's got them stashed all over the country in order to avoid a decapitation strike.
Yeah, does people realize if all they have to do is hit a couple ports in your country, or New York or Washington, and that'd be enough the country would be finished. You know, it doesn't take many, to cause chaos and infrastructure collapse and EMP fields and all this other stuff going on. So it doesn't take a lot to ruin your day.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. North Korea, if they send a missile over the United States, they shouldn't do a ground burst. They should do it above the magnetosphere and let the EMP do the rest of the work.
Yep, that's it. That's all it takes. And then that's the end of the infrastructure for a long time. You'd be running horse and buggies. Hey, Mike, with Tulsi Gabbard, remember when she went to Syria and met with Assad?
Yep.
And what they call her? An appeaser, or a Russian agent, just like they did with Ron Paul. That's what we're up against. That's what these people are like. They're not good people. They're garbage. You know, they got to get rid of them, period. I know you're against, like, having a armed revolt, and I'm not for violence, Mike,
yep.
but, I mean, these people, that's what it's going to take. I'm sorry.
I'm hearing that from so many different places right now. And if an armed revolution starts in this country, I'm not going to risk my body standing up and trying to protect the government. I'm just stand off to one side with a camera, let them walk on past. Hi guys, have fun.
But the military would most likely, because remember there was that study where it said like the Navy would probably stand by and do nothing. The Air Force would most likely back the government for whatever reason, depending on the pilot. But the Army and the Marines would side with the American people, well, the majority, which means, you know, the government would be decapitated at that point, because there's just no way without an Army and a Marine Corps you can, you know, with just like partial Air Force and Navy standing by that, you would be able to defeat like a civil uprising to that point.
Yeah.
You know, and remember, majority of the gun owners are conservative, you know, for the most part.
Actually, all the gun owners are conservatives. I've never met a liberal who had a gun.
Yeah, but throw in the guerrilla warfare part of it,
yep.
You know, well, you can learn a lot from the Iraq War and the Vietnam War, right?
Yep.
The government would lose, Mike. Like, maybe not in the short term, but in the long term it would lose because it'd be like a war of attrition. And, you know, how about we just build a wall around Washington, D.C.? You know, instead of building a wall on the border, like you said, put crocodiles in the Rio Grande, right?
Yep.
And then just like build a wall around Washington D.C. and starve them out. You know, I mean, yeah, they're garbage. So, Mike, the lies. Rex Tillerson really disappointed, right? Like, I mean, what happened to this guy? Somebody slipped a Mickey in his drink or something.
Yes,
I mean,
absolutely. But the neocons are back in control, and the neocons are dreaming of world conquest, no matter how much of other people's money they have to spend, and no matter how many of other people's children have to die in it, because they serve a noble purpose.
But we'd lose because it's a tech war. It's a missile war, a drone war, and China's got the population. I mean, they don't even, I mean, they don't have to come here. There's nothing that we have that they want. They have the manufacturing of the world. Yes. They have the infrastructure. They could just sit back like they are now and letting us rot away. We're rotting away at this point while we talk.
Yes.
You know, we're rotting away, and with this arguments over, like, you know, transgenderism and all this other crap going on in this country, or Trump's unfit because he's got dementia and all this other bull crap. You know, and then they're all freaking out. And this is why we're rotting away, Mike. Did you notice nothing's getting done? I mean, nothing. Absolutely nothing.
I agree.
You know, nothing will get done. I believe nothing's going to get done, Mike. I mean, we're on the road to the end. You know, I don't know how long it's going to take, if it's Trump's second term or if he's going to make it to a second. But yeah, this is it, Mike. Like, there's nothing being fixed. I mean, you got some jobs being created, but not
enough.
I saw a video on YouTube, Mike, with homeless people lined up on the streets of a bike path. I mean, for miles, Mike.
Yes.
Like, that's a low unemployment rate, because the unemployment rate's phony.
Of course it's phony. It's a complete phony. They keep saying it's 4.1% unemployment. That's just the number of people who lost jobs in the last 2 weeks. And what they're not including in that number, of course, is the almost 100 million, or last I heard it was slightly over 100 million Americans who've been unable to find a real job for weeks, months, and years. And that puts our real jobless rate at close to 40%.
And some people call these homeless people, sure, they have some drug problems. Sure, some of those people have mental issues, and they're veterans. You know, there's actually a lot of them that are veterans.
Yes.
You know, but, you know, Mike, as housing prices go up from the Ponzi scheme, people can't afford to live in the city. They got nowhere to go, so they have a tent. That's sad, ain't it? Like how it's such a Ponzi scheme of increasing housing prices by the banks to prop up value in the stock market. Then all these people got nowhere to go but to live off the street. That's why you got like a lot of tent cities popping up, plus they're out of work. Remember there was a thing with the people working for Silicon Valley. that were living out of trailers.
Yes.
So there's obviously an infrastructure problem in this country, but like I said, it's not going to get fixed because they don't care. They don't care. They'll bring in people on, like the illegal immigrants or the refugees in Europe, and they put them on welfare, and they put them into debt, even though they can't pay the debt off. You know, so what a scam, what a fraud, Mike. I'm so disappointed in Trump. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I thought he could change stuff, but you know what? It proves he either can't or he won't. And he should have got rid of the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA, and he didn't. And that's to his mistake, you know. And for the people who still support him, why didn't he get rid of the bad apples like he could have? There's no excuse for that.
I agree. His biggest single mistake coming into the White House was he wanted to be magnanimous in victory and allowed a lot of the Obama holdovers to remain. What he really should have done was fire everybody and bring in people from outside the Beltway who know how to do the functions that need to be done. And then he would have had the freedom to enforce his agenda. But instead of draining the swamp, he hired all the alligators into the top staff positions.
And Mike, real quick, I want to talk about Apple, how they're supposedly going to bring some jobs back here. So where were they like 20 years ago? You know, where?
They were in Silicon Valley, but I think they moved a lot of their operations over to other countries like Ireland, which has a very positive tax structure. And do you realize if we quit all these wars and we were able to lower taxes, that we would now become attractive to other nations to send their manufacturing here? But as long as we're in a wartime economy where everything that is floating around in terms of wealth is focused on that war or making more wealth, this is a very unattractive place for business. Now, Apple isn't saying that they're going to be creating a lot of jobs. What they're saying is because of the change in the tax law and the fact that they were, in fact, hiding some money offshore, they're going to start bringing that money back on in and pump it into the economy. It doesn't necessarily translate to jobs because, again, right now, most of what Apple is doing is simply pushing iPhones, iPads, iWatches, the iRing. Believe it or not, they're working on that. And those are still being manufactured in China.
But the thing is, they're going to pump it into the stock market because they're going to do buybacks, Mike. That's what they're going to do.
That's probably what they're going to do. That's what they're going to do. All right, well, listen, Dustin, I got to let you go. We got to do a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And Donald Trump is now out there claiming that the Russians are not doing enough to put economic pressure on North Korea. And can you start to sense the schizophrenia in our foreign policy? Because the U.S. is openly hostile to Russia. They're blaming Russia for everything. They're provoking Russia. Same thing with China. Now we're getting into a trade war with China. Then Trump turns around and demands that Russia and China help him crush another nation, North Korea. It strikes me that if you want other nations to do something for you, you should be nice to them. But that's apparently not the way of the U.S. government. It's simply bullying and blustering and screaming and crying. And Dustin is right. This nation is already rotting apart. And it's a very schizophrenic government we have right now, collectively. Individually, they're sociopaths. Collectively, they're schizophrenic. Now, there's an article that came out in Russia Today that really does lay out what needs to happen with the two Koreas. And it says, if the U.S. is sidelined, if they mind their own business, the two Koreas can work towards peace and stability. And basically they're saying, yeah, there's a lot of progress coming out of these talks, these inter-Korean talks. Now, I can imagine right now that South Korea would be looking at North Korea's nuclear weapons not as a threat, but an asset if they reunify. Because now all of a sudden South Korea, well, the whole Korea, would have the means to deter invasion and attack. we might see a surprise come out of those talks. I would not rule out they're coming on out and saying, we've decided to reunify. End of story. We're going to be friends now. The way Vietnam reunified, the way Germany reunified. Now, apparently, the Chinese are building a new military base just 6 miles east of where they had this standoff with Indian forces just last year. And apparently it includes trenches, barracks, multiple helipads. Gun emplacements have been dug. At the moment, satellite photos show they're still unoccupied by heavy weaponry, but you're not going to dig a gun emplacement without intending to put one in there. So Chinese troops and armored vehicles have built up in the area, including a full mechanized regiment of what appear to be ZBL-09 infantry fighting vehicles, which can be equipped with howitzers and anti-aircraft suites. So now we've got another tense border situation, this one between China and India. Meanwhile, India has test-fired what they call the Agni-5. This is a nuclear-capable ICBM, long range. All right, we're going to take a break for station identification. We'll be right back. And Aloha America, welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Now, as you know, there has been a big push for hypersonic aircraft, hypersonic missiles, hypersonic drones over the last several years, being developed and tested by the United States, Russia, and China, possibly others, but those are the 3 big players. And I remember years ago when I was still involved in aerospace, they were starting to work on some of that technology. But apparently, there was this story about how a Lockheed executive from the famed Skunk Works was giving a technical talk about manufacturing methods. And this was Jack O'Banion, the Vice President of Strategy and Customer Requirements, Advanced Development Programs from Lockheed Martin, spoke at an aerospace conference last week. And he was going on about how new methods of digital manufacturing and digital printing, that hypersonic planes could not have been made without it. And he was talking about how they can fabricate engine components, engine panels, with the cooling channels built right into them using 3D printing. And the way he was talking, it sounded like we already had one, a working hypersonic bomber, nicknamed Son of Blackbird, the SR-72. And so people were saying, you're talking as if this thing already exists. And then he kind of clammed up, and Lockheed issued an official statement saying, no, there is no such thing, and anybody who says so is just a tinfoil hat wearing raving conspiracy kook. Now, the Skunk Works, for those of you who are into aviation, is legendary. That's where Lockheed developed some of the most amazing aircraft, like the original SR-71, which was built, put in service. It's been retired, and it still looks like it belongs 20 years into the future. So if anybody is out there putting this together, it's going to be Lockheed. And so we just have to keep our ears open for unexplained sonic booms. I remember back in the 90s in Southern California, there were what were called the Aurora quakes. And these were sonic booms that just reached all across California. And apparently some kids at various universities set up microphones with very accurate timers on them and were able to basically deduce that what was causing the sonic boom was an object coming down into the atmosphere from outer space at about Mach 5, which is re-entry speed. So, all very, very hush-hush. I don't like war, but some of the toys they come up with are very, very cool. I know it's hypocritical of me. Getting onto the economy, Donald Trump is basically talking more and more about a trade war with China. And as we reported yesterday, financial experts are concerned a trade war between the U.S. and China would have global repercussions. But Donald Trump is out there thumping on his chest and saying, yeah, we're going to have a trade war. I wonder what he thinks he's going to fight a trade war with. Right now, we're buying all of our manufactured goods, most of them, from China to put in those big box stores. We could stop buying them. And yes, China would suffer a little bit of harm. In fact, the reason that China is in an economic mess right now is because the Americans no longer have the money to constantly buy new Chinese-made goods in this country. Trump could turn that off entirely. What is China buying from the United States? Not a whole heck of a lot, but China does own a lot of property here, and they're owed a lot of money because of that trade imbalance. I don't think Trump is coming out from a position of strength. Okay, so getting on back to the story about Apple. Apple's made a bunch of announcements about its investment in and contribution to the U.S. economy, in part because of the new tax law, which is, of course, what Donald Trump wanted to have happen. Now, we know that drug lords will smuggle drugs into the country, and Miami is a favorite entry point. But apparently, drug lords have a sideline now. They're smuggling gold because there's a huge demand for gold, not just for investment purposes and jewelry, but industrial use. There are gold components in your modern electronics. And sometimes there is not an adequate supply from the recognized legitimate providers. And so in parts of Peru, the drug cartels are operating illegal gold mines, and they're harvesting the gold, and they're bringing it into the United States alongside their drug shipments, where gold is gold is gold. It's all melted together and shaped into bullion and sold on the market. But apparently, last year, more than $35 billion in smuggled gold cycled through Miami. That is a lot of gold. Story coming out of your destination now. Apparently over at RBS, Royal Bank of Scotland, staff were shocked when one of their bosses, they were having a meeting about RBS customers who've gone broke, in part because of some of the things RBS has done. And apparently the boss just said, let them hang themselves, which I think is quite revealing of the attitude of bankers toward you mere mortals. All right, we're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Russia's space program is facing a little bit of a shortfall because they try and self-fund. Right now, they sell their rocket engines to the United States of America, because the United States of America sort of forgot how to do that. As part of this globalism, we'll let the Russians make the rocket engines, and we don't have to do that anymore. The U.S. is now struggling to catch up on that. The other part where Russia is making money, of course, is ferrying astronauts up to the International Space Station, which goes for $8 million a ticket. But starting next year, if NASA's plans work out the way they want, the United States will be manufacturing its own rocket engines again, and will have the ability to take astronauts to the International Space Station using one of the private space ventures like SpaceX. And that's a little bit of a problem because Russia's space program's budget, almost one-third of it, is the money they get from the U.S. for taking astronauts to the space station and for selling these rocket engines for the Atlas V missile. But they're already making contingency plans, and apparently there are already negotiations with China. When they stop selling those rocket engines to the United States, China is going to buy them. This is the RD-180 engine. It's 40 years old, but it's a reliable workhorse, and everybody wants that. I'm still smelling tulips around Bitcoin, and this story is reinforcing it. Apparently, Emil Oldenburg, he's the co-founder and chief technology officer of Bitcoin.com. He just dumped all of his Bitcoins, and he's saying it's as good as useless. And he's saying how the market has become very illiquid, And Bitcoin's main drawbacks are the high fees and transaction costs and the resistance to change from people running the old Bitcoin network. So there's a little bit of infighting in there. Now, I went on out and I did a little bit of research, and I actually found a website, coinmap.com, which will actually show you places that will do business in Bitcoin. And there are even a few here on the island of Oahu. So it's getting out there a little bit, but again, I don't like the fact that you can't put it in your pocket and take it with you. I don't like the fact that it has a commodity base on which to support its value. Its value is entirely what people are willing to pay for it. And it's been very, very volatile, and I still don't even know how I can sell my Bitcoins and convert them to cash. So a monetary system has to be easy to use. You know, here's a coin. All right, we're done. Apparently, cryptocurrency BitConnect plunged from 321 to just over 35 today, drop of more than 86%, after regulators from state authorities issued cease and desist letters for unauthorized sale of securities. And apparently they're concerned that there may have been a little bit of a Ponzi scheme running, but BitConnect is apparently no longer with us. Okay, let's talk about what's going on over in Europe, Great Britain. Apparently Angela Merkel is having serious trouble, and apparently Merkel might actually be forced to resign before she finishes her fourth term, let alone any possibility of running for a fifth. According to the director of data and polling at Rasmussen Global, Nina Schick, basically in Germany, there's certainly awareness that Merkel won't be serving a fifth term, and whether or not she will even complete the fourth term. There's a question mark over that. Germany needs new political blood. Apparently, this coalition government that she put together isn't working on out. And again, the issue comes down to the migrants, the refugees, the open border. And the German people are saying enough is enough is enough. And Merkel is still dedicated to that new world order. All right, let's take a phone call. Roxanne in Texas, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind? Roxanne, are you there?
Hello?
There you are. I hear you now. What's on your mind?
Yes, hi. I just wanted to do 3 quick points about the Hawaii situation. First of all, we know on the 10th, Huma was seen over at the Four Seasons. Bill Clinton was on the 12th. He met with 2 senators on the Big I. Sorry, my voice cracked. And Hilda was supposed to, Hillary, I called her Hilda, was supposed to meet with Rosie O'Donnell. So we know that 3 of them were there. There's question of Podesta being there, but that's rumor. But anyway, on the DEFCON alert, that has 5 fail-safes. Then it has approval. I'm sorry, my voice is cracking, but it sends a message over to the, it's called Bluffdale Data Center in Utah. So that all didn't go through. And one last thing, because my voice is cold here. There was a reef runway on the Honolulu airport. There was a body found at 12 or something. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that. I don't remember hearing that.
Yeah, it's in the papers there. But they found a body at the international airport. And I'm sorry, I'll let you go because my voice is all cracky in the cold
All
here.
right, well, feel better. You know, get warmer. Take care of yourself. Certainly do not catch that flu bug. Yeah, I understand. Politicians like to come to Hawaii, especially when it's that cold on the mainland. And Hawaii is a place where they can come on out here and not be followed automatically by a phalanx of corporate media reporters. You can get a lot of privacy here. Rosie O'Donnell, of course, has a house here. So does Oprah Winfrey. Not on this island. They're down on Maui. Maui's a very nice place to be living if you've got lots of your own money. As far as that having any connection to this drill, I don't see it. I still think this was a test of how the people of Hawaii and the people of Japan were going to react to the news of an incoming ballistic missile, for some kind of either civil defense planning or, worst case, getting ready for a false flag. Because at this point, from where I sit, the U.S. government is desperate to get a war going in North Korea before North Korea and South Korea kiss and make up. So it's literally a race on that issue. So we're going to be very, very concerned about that. Now, getting on back to Europe, apparently the German far-right Reich citizens are planning their own army. And this is what's called the Reichsbürger movement. It's grown to almost 16,000 members. And they want to have their own armed wing, shades of the Nazi Party, which had their armed wing, the brown shirts. So very alarming developments over there in Germany. Meanwhile, up in Switzerland, the right-wing and anti-immigration Swiss People's Party and Action for Independent and Neutral Switzerland Popular Movement have until July of next year to acquire the necessary 100,000 signatures in order for the popular vote to take place. And they're talking about getting out of the EU, getting away from all this open border nonsense. Now, ex-advisor of Ukrainian Security Service has announced the threat of a Polish spring in Lviv. As you know, Poland, along with Hungary, are straining at the EU leash. They're angry at this open borders nonsense. Okay, I'm hearing somebody on the line. Is that Bob in Colorado? Bob, are you there?
Holy cow, I coughed. I didn't know I was online.
Yeah, the volume was up. I was going to come to you right after this story. So what's on your mind?
Oh, I wanted to mention something about Bitcoin. I don't know what the story is. I never trusted it from the very beginning. I always thought it was a scam. But if it's worth a certain amount of money, why don't you find a car dealership if you have any Bitcoin, because it's for what I forget how much it's going for, and try to use the Bitcoin, buy a car, and that way you have something solid instead of trying to figure out what to do with it.
Well, I'm perfectly in agreement with that, you know, and Claire and I, we've decided we have to get a newer car. There's no question about that. The problem is, looking again at CoinMap, looking at the companies on Oahu that will accept Bitcoin as payment, none of them are car dealerships. So in order to use the fractions of Bitcoins that have been donated to me, it's not a lot, but it's a little bit, I'd like to convert it to U.S. dollars so that we can put it into the car fund.
Well, that was my whole problem with Bitcoin to begin with, because you couldn't go in, trade it like you go to the airport, you want to transfer U.S. into whatever, you know, and get the transfer fee. But this thing that they claim that they're mining and everything else, and you can't actually, like you say over and over, you can't actually pull it out of your pocket and use it. So I'd find somewhere, if you need equipment or something, start getting rid of it, man, and buying equipment or something to help you out. But it was just my thought. Have a great one.
Yeah, well, I'm working on that. And again, that's another part of the problem with Bitcoin, is how difficult it is to use, to go from Bitcoin to any other currency or not. But I'll work it on out in my copious amounts of free time. Thank you very much for the phone call, Bob. We're going to let you go here. And, you know, right now my schedule is a little full. I'm taking care of Claire. I'm dealing with the problems of having moved to the new server. BAM user goes away this weekend. I have to get a replacement for that up and running. And I'm going to try and drop yet another computer onto this Skype change to get rid of this annoying echo I'm listening to, which makes it very hard to speak clearly and smoothly. Now, Hungary is getting ready to basically pass legislation to tackle illegal immigration, and they're talking about, they're calling it the Stop Soros legislation, because they're saying that the immigration problem in Europe is being primarily encouraged by George Soros, and they're absolutely right. Soros is a driving force behind the one world government, new world order. He dreams of a single golden throne of planet Earth with his rear end sitting on it. And so do all the people who are helping him do this. They're all dreaming of the day they'll sit on that throne. Of course, they can't all sit on that throne. And the problem I have with that, I've mentioned many, many times. The larger a government gets, the more corrupt it gets. Imagine how corrupt a planetary government is going to be when there's nobody around to stand up and oppose them. It'll be out of control. Now, the Immigration Customs Enforcement, or the Department of Homeland Security, is planning a massive Northern California immigration sweep to basically strike back against the sanctuary state status. And the Department of Homeland Security is talking about charging California officials under Title VIII, specifically Section 1324, which makes it a crime to bring in and harbor certain aliens. 1 count per alien involved. And when you look at the population of illegal immigrants in California, that is a lot of jail time. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And if you would like to help support Republic Broadcasting and keep us on the air, the postal address to send check or money order or box tops or whatever is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number, if you want to become a recurring subscriber, is 800-724-2719, extension 03. We're going to go ahead and take another phone call from Catherine in Texas. Aloha, Catherine. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
It's nice to talk to you. Thank you for taking my call, and I'm sending love and prayers to Claire for health.
Thank you.
I want to talk about Bitcoin. Quickly, Coinbase is where you can transfer your dollars to Bitcoin and other cryptos, and super easy. And you know, you can have security software and computer program and stuff, so super easy, Coinbase. Also, you can get something called a BitPay. It's a Visa card that acts like a debit card.
Okay.
You put your Bitcoin up, you go anywhere that accepts a debit Visa card, and you can pay with Bitcoin that way. And then also, CNET.com, a new social media site that pays you in crypto that you can exchange through blockchain, through Coinbase. So I know I sound nervous. Anyway, I just wanted to let you know that it is super easy to exchange dollars and crypto. And I mean, I'm just a nurse and now housewife, and I can do it. So I just didn't want you to be afraid. And the BitPay Visa card, then you can spend it anywhere. So. Okay,
all right, I'm looking at it now. Thank you for the pointer on that one. It wasn't that I was afraid. It's just that it's not high on my list of priorities of things to get done. And I'm actually a little bit on overload these days right now. But thank you. I've bookmarked that, and I'll go back to that. And at some point, I'll get around to cashing out my Bitcoins, you know, assuming the crash doesn't wipe me out entirely.
Okay, or just hold it, you know, just sit there, keep doing your thing, and then like in 2 years you'll look and be like, we can move back to the States now.
I might just do that. I mean, I have to be honest, there's not a lot in there. There's not a lot in there. But I might just let it sit and see what happens. I'm not going to be panicked by the current dip. I mean, to me, it's not even real money. It's not even real money, so I don't really care.
Hey, I've got you. That's what Venezuela is coming out with the petro, and they're going to back up their petro coin with their minerals and oil reserves.
Yes.
So, I mean, there's movement in backing crypto with commodities as well.
That's a good sign.
But anyway,
here.
I listen to you.
I was going to say
I listen to you every day, and I just. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Okay, well, thank you very much for the phone call and for tuning on in and for your support. And we're going to let you go here right now. What I was about to say was it's a very good sign that Venezuela is going to have a cryptocurrency that is backed by a commodity. That's going to stabilize its price. And the United States obviously is in a panic over this because this cryptocurrency backed by a commodity is operating outside the control of the private central banks, and worse, it gives Venezuela a possible means of evading the ongoing economic war being waged on them by the United States government. So they're not too happy about that. Now, before we went to commercials and took phone calls and the rest of it, we were talking about how the Immigration Customs Enforcement is ready to do a huge sweep through Northern California. They're estimating at least 1,500 people they're going to round on up for deportation. And the San Francisco Gate is reporting that the Bay Area police are unlikely to help the Immigrations and Customs Enforcement people on the immigration sweeps. And they're going to have to walk a very, very fine line there, because they can just sort of stand there and not be involved, and that's still technically legal, even if it is disloyal to the United States immigration policy. If they actively interfere with Immigration's Customs Enforcement, if they get in their way, that's a Title 18, Section 1324 violation, and they're going to be in serious trouble. So this thing is ramping up. Now, humanitarian groups down along the border are complaining that Border Patrol agents are destroying food and water caches left for the migrants in the Arizona desert. Well, again, these humanitarian groups are in violation of Title 8, Section 1324, by putting those food and water caches in the desert. And so I think the Border Patrol or Department of Homeland Security ought to maybe arresting them as well. There is a proper way to come into this country through the immigration process. And for those who come into this country following the rules, welcome. I hope we're not a horrible disappointment to you. But this idea of just opening up the borders and bringing in all these Democratic voters, and the Democratic Party is now admitting that's what they're doing, that must stop. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And over the commercial break, I hunted down this story. And yes, it turns out last Saturday, some hours after our false missile alert, there was a body found on what's called the Reef Runway, the outermost runway at the Honolulu International Airport. And really not much information. They don't know who it is. And the suspicion is it may have been somebody who had stowed away on an airplane, possibly up in the wheel well, which is dangerous to do anyway because of the altitude and the temperature during most of the flight. And they may have simply fallen out of the wheel well when the plane was landing. But somebody spotted the body there, and they closed down the Reef Runway, and they've taken the body away, and that's the most recent I can find on it. End of story. That's it. Now, getting on back to immigration. Here's an interesting little story from AmericanThinker.com. It's titled, What I Learned in the Peace Corps in Africa, Trump is Right. And it's basically a personal memoir of somebody who joined the Peace Corps back when that was the thing to do, and went to Senegal, West Africa, to run a community center in a rural town. And he said it was placid with no danger except to your health, and the danger was considerable because of the fact that the people in the town would just go potty wherever they were standing. And they would just defecate on the open ground, and as it would dry, it would powder, it would get blown around with the dust, and it had parasites that could bore through your skin and cause organ failure. And so the gist of the article is this guy is appalled that liberals are pushing the idea that our modern Western civilization here in the United States of America is really no better than a third world country like Senegal. Yes, it is. Senegal hasn't put a man on the moon. We should be proud of our country, and we should be very concerned about anybody who wants to take this country away from the people who actually built it, generation after generation after generation, and just barter it to foreigners in exchange for votes. But then if you're looking at everything else the Clintons have been selling off that they can for wealth and power, The Uranium One deal, now we're finding out about this shipping port down in Florida that was sold off to, leased off to a Middle Eastern company with ties to Iran and North Korea. Sure, why not just, bring in all of these refugees and illegal immigrants and say when there's enough of you there to vote, you can vote your ownership of this country. And you will live like the Americans even though you didn't actually build this place. Apparently there's been another tragic story over in Great Britain of a homeless veteran who froze to death in the streets of Edinburgh. And it sparked outrage among veterans' charities who are saying more has to be done to look after ex-servicemen. And yes, they're right. Even if you don't agree with the wars, and I certainly do not, we collectively do owe a debt of honor to those who put on the uniform, take the vow, and obey their orders, even though the orders themselves may be war crimes. And they're not being taken care of. The government spends huge amounts of money training them to be killers on command, and once their time is up, there's no investment on helping them reintegrate back into normal society. And that's where a lot of these problems come from. They can't fit in. They're still in that battlefield mindset. We have a lot of homeless veterans here on Oahu. And it's very angering to me to see all this money being poured all over the refugees to bring them on into this country, and there's nothing being done to help our homeless veterans who basically have made a tremendous sacrifice for the U.S. government. Now, the European Commission has announced the creation of a task force to combat misinformation and fake news in the media, and one of the members of the group will be the CEO of Sweden's public broadcaster. This is Hanna Stjärn, CEO of Sveriges Television, will be joining the Commission group on disinformation along with the head of the European Broadcasting Union and former Director General of the Irish public broadcaster RTE, Noel Curran. And the task force has been created to advise the EU on the spread of fake news online. In other words, they're targeting their equivalent of the independent media. If there's one thing the independent media has done, we have succeeded in removing the ability by government and corporate media to lie with impunity. And without that, they can't function. That's why they're desperate to get it back. They're trying to find a way to silence all dissent and differing opinions. They're getting the social media companies to come on in with this heavy-handed censorship. Apparently, Facebook and Google were testifying before Congress openly about how only the liberal point of view is reaching the end user. And conservative points of view are being silenced. And it's not just liberal versus conservative. Apparently down in South Carolina, Governor Henry McMaster is pushing for the South Carolina Senate to pass H3643, which would adopt the definition of anti-Semitism set forth by the Special Envoy to monitor and combat anti-Semitism of the Department of State in the fact sheet issued on June 8, 2010. Now, what that really means is that new definition of anti-Semitism includes criticism of the government of Israel. And South Carolina wants to criminalize that. Basically, they're taking the position that the only reason anybody would criticize the actions of the government of Israel is because they hate Jewish people. And to me, that makes about as much sense as saying that the only reason anybody would criticize the crimes of the Nazis is because you hate the German people. You're just being anti-German. It really is that absurd. Now, finally, we're getting a little bit of justice at the hands of the police brutality. Down in Texas, there was a gentleman who was arrested by 3 deputies, and they basically came up to his house. He came out with his hands up, offered no resistance whatsoever, and then he simply asked, "Do you have a warrant?" At which point, one of the police kicked his leg out, knocking him to the ground, and they all got on him and just beat him up. Then they claimed he had attacked them, and they just threw him in jail on all these charges, resisting arrest, assault on a police officer, there was only one small problem. This man had a home security system with a TV camera which showed the deputies acted totally out of line, and a Texas federal jury has awarded this man more than $1.3 million in this civil lawsuit against the deputies. Now, there's one problem with that. The deputies themselves are not going to have to pay that money. The Texas taxpayers will. I think we need a law that makes law enforcement personnel, or for that matter, any official, personally financially liable for bad mistakes they make. We might actually get better government out of it if people working in government understood there was a personal penalty to be paid if they don't do the job correctly. Now, Brigitte Bardot, if you're my age, you know very well who that was, a very famous French film star. And she's basically coming on out responding to all this talk about Hollywood sexual harassment and basically saying this is hypocrisy. And she says these statements are ridiculous. Bardot stressed that Hollywood actresses seduce producers themselves to get desired roles. And yes, I saw it happen myself when I worked in the film industry. And that now being a victim of sexual harassment and assault is fashionable. Oh, I was assaulted. I was harassed. And Bardot said, you know, it seemed pleasant to me when I was told I was beautiful or that I had a nice little butt. Such compliments are pleasant. And she's right. And I've mentioned this before. When I was working in Germany in the 1990s, the staff at this company I was working at, if you didn't flirt with them, if you didn't tell them how good they looked that day, your paperwork went missing. These things are entirely a matter of fashion. Now, obviously, forcible rape is definitely something that should not be encouraged. But Bardot is right. Actresses will offer themselves to producers and directors in the hope that they're going to get the role that somebody else will not. That's just the way it is. And it's not just in Hollywood. Anytime you have any kind of an entity, industry, politics, wherever, where there are only a few jobs, and you have thousands and thousands of people who want those jobs, there are going to be some of those people who are willing to make that trade, to go on out and basically say, hey, baby, let's take a meeting in your office with the door closed. Now, here's political correctness that has really gone way over the top. Over in Manchester, Great Britain, they have a school, the Altrincham Grammar School for Girls. It's a female-only school. They have made the decision to drop the word girls from their school name in order to not offend any transgender pupils from being offended. This has stirred a public outcry, with some people saying the policy is going to rob children of their identity. And others are saying, what is the school going to be called now? It was founded specifically for girls. What are they going to call it now? The Altrincham Grammar School, no men allowed. It really is getting silly. Now, a little bit of good news. You're going to love this one. Secretary of Education Betsy DeVos has banned Common Core from being taught in U.S. schools after concluding that the Obama-era program had been confirmed to be dumbing down American kids. Hooray, hooray for that one. And it was a horrible, horrible program. It was not only dumbing down the American kids, it was misteaching them important things about our history, like the Bill of Rights. Common Core was teaching kids that the Second Amendment only allows a state-controlled militia the right to keep and bear arms. When Common Core first came on out, teachers were literally told, do not let the parents see any of this. And I got a lot of these stories. We used to have this neighbor lived right next door who had come to Hawaii to help the Hawaii school system implement Common Core. And when she was off duty, she would share all kinds of stories, and she let me look at a lot of the materials because she was fed up with it. She'd had a lifelong career in education, and she'd been hired by this company to do the Common Core thing, and she was absolutely appalled. And ultimately, she quit, went on to something else. So this is really good news for our educational system. We can go on back to actually teaching our kids how to think, how to analyze, how to solve problems. Science, engineering, math, skills that will help us regain our economic place in the world, rather than just being indoctrinated with a bunch of liberal garbage. Now, speaking of liberal garbage, apparently University of California at Berkeley is being sued by 4 people who were assaulted last year in the riots that led to the cancellation of an appearance by a conservative speaker. And this may set the precedent that more schools around the country could be sued for their handling of free speech-related protests. And the lawsuit basically sues the school, along with the city of Berkeley, for failing to protect the plaintiffs when they were beaten and pepper-sprayed during the rioting. So, good. We need to go back to where colleges and universities are open forums where everybody can share free ideas, discuss new ideas, new ways of running the country. That's what it was like when I was in school. And today, our colleges and universities have become the most rigid enforcers of the liberal ideology, and now they're going to get sued for it. Now, remember over in Chicago, held up as the model for gun control in the country. Well, apparently a Democratic candidate for Illinois Attorney General was robbed at gunpoint in broad daylight on Thursday. Aaron Goldstein and several members of his campaign team were in the middle of taking promotional photographs when they were robbed by 3 men who demanded the camera equipment and other personal belongings and their money. Nobody was harmed in the robbery, but the police believe it was a crime of opportunity and not a targeted assault. In other words, these 3 guys were just going to rob whoever they found. And they certainly had guns. And what a shame that Aaron Goldstein and his campaign team were not allowed to carry guns. They might still have all their camera equipment. Now let's get on to this situation about Larry Nassar. This story keeps getting uglier and uglier and uglier. And Larry has been tried, he's been convicted, he's coming up on the sentencing, and they're having what are called the sentencing hearings, where all of his victims can come on in and talk about what happened. And there was a big controversy over Olympic gymnast Michaela Maroney's testifying about her molestation because she reached a $1.5 million settlement with the U.S. Gymnastics Association, which included a non-disclosure agreement saying that if she ever talked about what happened, she would be sued or fined $100,000. And she signed that agreement. And so everybody was saying, what is she going to do? Well, Chrissy Teigen basically came on in and offered to pay the $100,000 fine. And that was a very generous thing for her to do. As it turns out, it won't be necessary. USA Gymnastics is saying they're waiving the non-disclosure requirement for the sentencing hearing. Michaela Maroney can testify all she wants. She will not be fined. So they backed off on that one. But apparently it's something like nearly 100 women are coming into the sentencing hearing to talk about all this. Anyway, we got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, and we're going to go ahead and take a phone call from Anonymous over in Iowa. And hello, Anonymous. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. You were talking about, education here a few minutes ago, and my daughter is a teacher in Illinois, and this is a city outside of Chicago, which could be determined as a particular type of hole. And she's trying very hard to get out of there. It's becoming extremely violent. Now there's a black-only refrigerator in the break room. Anybody else who attempts to put their lunch or anything in there, it's removed and it's sitting on the table. They have a full-time police officer in this school. This is a junior high, by the way. The gang violence has become such a problem, the police officer just doesn't do anything anymore. He just lets them duke it out, and they, separate the pile later. They had a white male principal there for a while, but he was fired and replaced with a black female who is extremely inept. And they're fudging the paperwork at this school to make it sound like it's a very scientific and math, very good in these general areas when nothing could be farther from the truth. This is a 7th grade teacher. Most of her students come in at the beginning of the year with possibly a 1st or 2nd grade reading level.
Mm-hmm.
And they have no desire to learn. If there is a child that is intelligent and does try to do well, they're bullied by the other students. How dare they step out of that circle? She can't leave her classroom during the day because of the violence in the hallway. It's not safe. She doesn't even use the restroom. And it's pretty serious out there.
Yeah, it's...
So that's just... Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, I understand what they're dealing with. Again, schools, along with everything else in our society, are being shortchanged in order to continue to fund the wars. And the school boards have become very corrupt. We had that story the other day about how a teacher was at a school board meeting commenting on how the school board members were getting these amazing raises and the teachers were being left behind, and it led to an altercation with the teacher ultimately being handcuffed. And it seems like the entire political system all the way down to the schools has just become a haven for corrupt individuals to come on in and enrich themselves and not really care about doing the job. And it's all very political. I remember I've had 2 teaching experiences in my life. The first one, many, many, many years ago, I taught a year of remedial math at the high school level. And I remember the attitude of the administration. I loved the kids. I couldn't get along with the administration. The attitude was that we were going to hammer a few minimum understandings into all the kids, and I was expressly forbidden for showing any attention onto the smarter students who really did want to learn more. Anyway, Anonymous, I understand what you're saying. I'm glad Common Core is gone, but we got to do a station identification break. Thank you very much. We'll be back. Aloha America, welcome back to our show, hour number 3, and the latest word coming from Capitol Hill, it's looking less and less like they're actually going to pass that spending bill, that emergency spending bill, and the current funding for the U.S. government runs out at midnight tonight. And so they're all going to go home, at which point we should close the doors, change the locks, and keep the keys for ourselves. Again, it's not a total government shutdown. What gets shut down are the things that the people need and want, and the things that we're not all that enthusiastic about, like the war machine. And the CIA and the FBI and the NSA, they're going to keep on running smoothly along. Now, Tucker Carlson, I'm becoming a big, big fan of him, of his work. A couple of days ago, he did basically a Twitter storm, where he was out there reminding everybody of all these hate crimes that turn out to be hoaxes. And this was sparked by the most recent one, where this 11-year-old girl up in Toronto claimed she was attacked because of her hijab, and Prime Minister got all over this and said, oh, we've got to be better to our Muslim populations. And it turned out she fabricated the story. So Tucker Carlson basically said, we got to keep in mind some of these others that were out there. There was that time an Air Force Academy cadet allegedly was targeted by racist remarks, and it turned out he'd been responsible for the act. He'd done it themselves. There was that Muslim college student who lied to police about being attacked on the subway by drunken Trump supporters. That story fell apart, and she had to plead guilty to filing a false police report. College student made up a story about Trump supporters throwing rocks at her. That one came apart. A Muslim professor at Indiana State University lied about receiving threatening emails and being attacked on campus. Then we had this Ann Arbor woman, had to plead guilty to making up the hate crime. She scratched herself with a safety pin during her women's literature class. She blamed it on Trump supporters, but it turned out, again, she did it herself. Church organist arrested after he vandalized his own church with a swastika and pro-Trump graffiti in order to mobilize a movement. And he justified it by saying, I wanted to give local people a reason to fight for good, even if it was a false flag. Here's another one, a note that used the N-word, led to classes being shut down for a day as student demonstrators accused the school of institutional racism. That turned out to be a hoax. A Muslim woman says she was robbed of her hijab and wallet by two white men, one of them with a Trump hat. It didn't happen. She was charged with filing a false police report. 3 Albany students, let's see, something University of New York, Albany, claimed they suffered a racist attack on the bus. Turned out they had been the attackers. You know, more and more buses have their own security cameras and recorders right now. Let's see. Yeah, and it just keeps on going. And nothing new there. There was the famous Tawana Brawley rape hoax that caused a lot of damage to a lot of people's lives. Turned out to be a hoax. There were a lot of rape hoaxes during the militant feminist movement of the 1990s. Innocent men got sent to jail. Families lost their kids for no real reason. It's completely out of control. Now, here is an interesting story, and I guess it gets under the category of going green. Apparently, the Los Angeles Police Department made a big deal about supporting the green movement, fighting global warming. They bought a fleet of electric BMWs, $10 million worth. But according to this article that came on out in Oraz.com, the cars are sitting in the garage. Nobody's actually using them. You could send me one. I'll take good care of it. So let's get into human-caused global warming. It's still out there, second winter storm. Apparently it's split into two branches, if you will. One is heading into New England. The other one is heading back down into Florida, probably going to be hitting Texas very soon. More than 2,000 flights canceled as 57 million East Coasters from Florida to Maine are hit with snow, ice, and freezing cold temperatures. As of today, all 50 states of the United States of America have snow someplace in their state. Some have snow all over the state. Some, it's only in the high places like here in Hawaii. But we do have a lot of snow up on Mauna Kea, Mauna Loa, and up on Haleakala. But if you want to talk about cold, over in Russia, the Yakutia region, temperatures went down to minus 84 degrees. And that's Celsius. In the Fahrenheit scale, it's minus 119 degrees. It is so cold, the thermometers are freezing and then bursting. And apparently they're expecting this cold to last all the way through the rest of the month. Another 2 weeks to go here. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Okay, over at Agence France Press, they're running a story. Basically, climatologists who have not been on Al Gore's payroll are going back and looking at some of these supposed peer-reviewed scientific studies talking about how warm the planet's going to be getting. And they're basically evaluating the methodology that's in the papers and saying they're not credible. The scenarios they're putting on out are not credible. And Earth will most certainly not warm up 4 or 5 degrees Celsius by 2100. And basically saying these worst-case projections were propaganda. They weren't science, which we already knew after the Hadley Climate Research Unit scandal over at the University of East Anglia. Now let's talk about the flu. This stuff is serious, and whatever number CDC are putting out, their last week's numbers, this thing is just exploding all over the country. In Santa Barbara, over the last 2 weeks, 8 people have died of this flu, 7 of whom had their flu shot. Little issue we need to look at there. Over in Texas, the Bonham School District has canceled school for an entire week due to the flu to keep students from infecting each other. Yes, you have to do that kind of thing. All over the country, hospitals are running out of supplies. They're running out of room. People are always talking about a new pandemic like the 1918 flu. If one of those were to hit, we're clearly unprepared for that. Now, I found a flashback article here. Basically, it says that vaccinations could actually make the flu worse if you're exposed to a second strain. And this was done by microbiologist Dr. Hannah Golding of the Center for Biologics Evolution and Research at Bethesda in Maryland, and colleagues at the National Animal Disease Center in Ames, Iowa, and elsewhere. Now, this study was done on pigs, and they basically vaccinated these piglets that had never been exposed to illness against the H1N2 influenza strain, and then later exposed them to H1N1, which hit them far more seriously than it would have otherwise. Now, the reason we have to be concerned about this, there are currently 3 different flu bugs hitting the U.S. and Europe. There's the Aussie flu, which seems to be the one predominantly here in Hawaii, the Japanese flu, and the French flu. And so people who've gotten the flu shot may actually be at risk, greater risk, of serious illness and death. Another flashback article, this from sciencemag.org. Apparently, vaccine-induced anti-HA2 antibodies promote virus fusion and enhance influenza virus respiratory disease. And rather than read you the abstract, which is very long and dry scientific language, the short version is they discovered this vaccine was actually triggering more rapid recombination and mutation of the flu. So don't forget to get your flu shot. They're still pushing that stuff out there. Another article coming on out from Natural Blaze reminding us that over the years, the Pentagon has been weaponizing influenza. And there have, in fact, been serious flu outbreaks around these government laboratories working on these bioweapons. So maybe somebody dropped a test tube someplace here. Another horror story coming from Tamiflu down in Texas. Apparently a girl got her FDA-approved Tamiflu shot to avoid cervical cancer, and apparently the family got a lot more they bargained for. The side effects included violent hallucinations and an attempt at suicide. Apparently the young girl used a desk to try and jump out of the second-story window in her bedroom. Fortunately, the mother caught her just in time. She also ran away from school. And when they finally got her to the hospital, the doctor told them that, yes, nervous system problems like psychosis are among the potential side effects of Tamiflu, although really it's just so rare, that's why we don't mention it. Well, it's certainly not a rare occurrence for that family. Okay, now here is another interesting article for those of you out there dealing with cancer, and sadly more and more of you are. Cancer rates continue to go on up. But apparently there's been yet another study, and as reported in Natural News, the study was done at the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center, and they discovered that radiation and chemotherapy treatments that kill tumor cells were found to cause cancerous tumors to grow bigger and more prolific. And the mechanism, now they found the mechanism, is that when you kill cancer cells, it creates inflammation. The inflammation feeds the growth of other cancers. This study links chemotherapy to the return and spread of cancer. All right, let's get on to the area of computers. A lot of stuff still going on. The fix that Intel has put out is causing problems. It's slowing machines down, which they warned that was going to happen, because it's disabling some of the systems on the CPU chip that were designed to accelerate computation, like the speculative execution system, where the chip actually takes a guess at what the next execution will be, the next instruction will be, and it does several of them and lines them up so if they guessed right, the results are all ready to go. And that apparently is the weak point for security in the system. But apparently Intel is saying that the reboot problem has been identified in its Ivy Bridge, Sandy Bridge, and Skylake processors. It also affects the KB Lake chips, the most recent offering. Now, over in the world of Linux, Red Hat has slammed into reverse on the CPU fix for the Spectre design blunder. Apparently, Red Hat was going on out there with a CPU microcode update. It was supposed to mitigate variant 2 of the Spectre design flaw in Intel and AMD processors, but apparently at the last second they pulled it on back, saying it's causing some systems to become unbootable. It's bricking computers. What a horrendous mess Intel has done here. So everybody is saying, why did it take so long? Why has this been there all along and nobody realized it, except, of course, for the hackers who were using it? And apparently it turns out that it was discovered quite by accident by a 22-year-old student. And the gentleman's name is Horn. And he was actually trying to figure out whether processors could handle an intense piece of number crunching code he had devised. So he went looking through these gigantic manuals last year. There are manuals that tell you how the CPU chips operate, and because the CPU chips are enormously complex, so are the manuals. And he eventually got around to the process known as speculative execution, and he discovered that even if the chip guessed wrong, the data it had retrieved would still be stored and could potentially be stolen by a clever hacker. And working from Google's Project Zero Lab in Zurich, he compared notes with other researchers before his discovery was announced. So that's where it came from. Intel didn't find this. Now, hackers are now exploiting 3 Microsoft Office flaws to spread a new malware named Zyklon, which I think tells us what nationality the hackers probably are. And apparently it's spreading an advanced botnet malware by leveraging at least 3 recently disclosed vulnerabilities in Microsoft Office. The fully featured malware has resurfaced after almost 2 years and primarily found targeting telecommunications, insurance, and financial services. In other words, places with a lot of CPUs in those racks where the additional load of being used as a botnet is less likely to be observed. Apparently this and it communicates with its command and control servers over Tor. The anonymizing allows attackers to remotely steal keylogs, sensitive data, passwords stored in web browsers and email clients. Zyklon is also capable of executing additional plugins, including using infected systems for DDoS attacks and cryptocurrency mining. Okay. Now, here's where computers are being used for less than honorable and that allows this professor to keep tabs on at least 400,000 Americans that she believes are members of the alt-right. This is Megan Squire. She's a 45-year-old professor of computer science at Elon. She's developed a software for the hard left with the admitted aim of not only getting right-wing patriots fired from their jobs, but possibly killed. Because Antifa has been known in the past to violently assault anyone they believe is a member of the alt-right. Now, here is another interesting little story. We've dealt with this before, but it's worth a rethink. Apparently, there is a 14-year-old girl in Minnesota who decided to send her boyfriend an explicit photo she took of herself with her cell phone, sexting. She may be facing up to 10 years in jail and be registered as a sex offender because the state of Minnesota is saying that's an act of child pornography. And the ACLU is calling this a perversion of the state's child porn laws, and I'm fully in agreement. So the ACLU is calling on Rice County Juvenile Court to throw out the felony charges against the 14-year-old girl. Her identity is being hidden, fortunately. She's known as Jane Doe. And the girl admits to sending a sexually explicit selfie to a boy she met at school using Snapchat. But apparently the boy, in a fit of bad taste, more widely, according to court documents cited by KSTP-TV. And the boy. Now, the kids are saying sexting is common among teens at my school. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here, and we're talking about the situation in Minnesota where a 14-year-old girl took an explicit selfie of herself, of her own free will, and sent it to this boy she'd met at school, which obviously she was interested in. He unfortunately he showed it to some other people. They're both looking at child porn charges that carry a 10-year prison sentence, plus requirement to be registered as a sex offender. The ACLU is saying this is a complete perversion of the state's child porn laws, and I agree. Nobody forced these kids to do this. They're just playing around. And the kids' own defense said, everybody at the school is doing it. They're all doing it. Now, let me share an insight with you. When I was a kid, before we had cell phones and cell phone cameras, it was called, you show me yours and I'll show you mine, where an interested girl, an interested boy would find some private place where they were not going to be interrupted and have a little impromptu anatomy lesson. Unfortunately, occasionally, the anatomy lesson would progress to something a little more, shall we say, physical, which could result in things like pregnancy and sexually transmitted diseases. Personally, I think sexting over a cell phone is a much safer expression of young people's emerging sexuality. You're not going to get pregnant over a cell phone. You're not going to get a sexually transmitted disease over a cell phone. So I wish they'd lighten up a little bit. This is natural behavior for kids to do. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Mike in Alaska, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. Speaking of cell phones, I wanted to ask you a question about Bluetooth.
Yes.
I recently got a Bluetooth headset, and I've been one of these people that I don't put the cell phone close to my body, or I take it out of my pocket when I'm in the car. But I'm wondering, I don't know a whole lot about Bluetooth, and I'm really enjoying the headset. I've got, I put it on and listen to music or listen to you, and I'm wondering, should you have a Bluetooth headset in your ears for an extended period of time?
Well, I think what you need to look at is the relative amount of radio energy coming out of the cell phone versus the Bluetooth. The whole idea of Bluetooth is they are very low powered. They're only supposed to reach a few inches, maybe a couple of feet. Now that's in contrast to the cell phone, which has to have a transmitter capable of reaching the cell tower that could be a mile away. And so obviously a Bluetooth headset is going to be much safer for your brain than simply putting the cell phone right up to your ear. Personally, I just plug in a regular headset so I can have the cell phone down on my belt and I get stereo music and phone calls in my ears.
Great. Yeah, I knew there was a difference. I thought it was quite a bit safer, and, you know, I just thought I would check because I don't quite understand how it works. It is only a few feet in range.
Yes.
One other thing, Mike, I wanted to point out with all this cold weather, maybe not in Hawaii, but in the lower 48, you know, we've been experiencing unreasonably warm temperatures. So it's actually, we had some freezing rain, got above the freezing point, you know, rained overnight. So the weather, my point is the weather is always changing, you know, and I just wonder how these guys that have spent all their life on this global warming thing are going to put that back in the box. That Pandora's box of global warming hoax is opening up.
Oh, they're already out there with articles. I saw 3 of them today pronouncing that last year was the warmest year on record, one of the 3 hottest years on record. They're still trying to sell this idea. And I think they're playing to those human beings whose perception of reality is just what they see over those TV screens or hear on the radio. But for anybody who's actually out there dealing with these storms, they know it's a lot of nonsense.
Great show. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go here. And getting on back to the news, another article about Russia is constructing its own Internet. And apparently this started last November, and they're moving ahead. And apparently this Internet is going to reach outside of Russia itself to the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, in order to protect them from what is politely termed possible external influence, meaning keeping the NSA from breaking into their computers and stealing information. There's no reason you can't set up your own Internet. A lot of communities are starting to set up their own civic Internet to guarantee equal access. But hopefully that lawsuit started by those 22 states' attorneys general is going to push the issue, saying that common carrier does apply to the Internet. And the FCC was being very capricious, just trying to, you know, do a favor for their masters over at the Internet service providers, the big media corporations. But the Internet is indispensable to us all, and it ought to be handled like a public utility. It ought to be managed as a public utility. Equal access for all. Unfortunately, that means having the government manage it, and so far the government is trying to carve it up and give the biggest pieces to the large corporations. But hopefully this case will go all the way to the Supreme Court, and it will come on back saying equal access for all, nobody gets cheated. We're going to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we were talking last week about this fad, very dangerous fad going around, called the Tide Pod Challenge. And the idea is those little pods, you put them in the washing machine to work with your clothes. Some are made for dishwashers. They're very pretty. They got lots of colors. And apparently somebody got the idea of just eating one on video. And apparently this fad caught on. First of all, the chemicals that are in these pods are very, very dangerous. And Canada Health issued a warning on it. Well, YouTube has decided they're going to take down all the Tide Pod Challenge videos. In this case, they have a policy in place in which they are free to take down any videos they feel are encouraging dangerous behavior. And in this case, I'm definitely on the side of YouTube here, because this is idiotic to be out there encouraging this kind of stuff here. Okay, stepping on back here to the immigration issue, we're getting a new story just coming on out. Apparently in California's Attorney General Xavier Becerra basically said during a press conference earlier today, any employers in California who cooperate with the Immigration and Customs Enforcement in their rumored upcoming raids will be prosecuted under the California sanctuary laws. Boy, talk about between a rock and a hard place. Darned if you do and darned if you don't. If you cooperate with ICE, the state of California prosecutes you. If you refuse to cooperate with ICE, the federal government prosecutes you under Title VIII. This thing is going to end up with race riots in the streets of California. I think the Department of Homeland Security needs to start going to people like this California Attorney General and the governor and the mayor of all these cities and start putting them in handcuffs. Now, over at Zero Hedge, they've got a story that is sourced from Popular Mechanics, so take it with a grain of salt. Remember, Popular Mechanics loves to make fun of the conspiracy theorists and anybody who questions the official story on 9/11 or TW800 or any of the rest of that. But they've come out with this story. This is the Booga Booga, to demonize Russia. And they're claiming they have a leaked copy of the Pentagon's Nuclear Posture Review that says Russia has developed a new intercontinental nuclear-armed undersea autonomous torpedo. And they're claiming that this weapon has a range of 6,200 miles, a maximum depth of 3,280 feet, and a speed of 100 knots. At which point I began to be suspicious about the story. Then it was followed up basically saying that this carries a 100 megaton thermonuclear weapon. Now, the Russians only ever built one 100 megaton nuclear weapon. It was actually as a demonstration, and when they set it off, they dialed it back to 50 megaton. It was called a Tsar bomb, and no way would it fit in a torpedo. But the scare story here is that the Russians have this torpedo that can be launched from a submarine, and it will just swim around the oceans. I don't know how it navigates. If it's underwater, it can't receive GPS. And then it will strike at an American coastal city. Booga, booga, booga. I'm not even going to bother posting this one to whatreallyhappened.com. Let's grab a telephone call. Art from Off the Grid. Aloha, Art. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, you know, you mentioned that Thai challenge. I remember hearing about that a little over a week ago for the first time and thought to myself, this just simply goes to prove what I've been saying about people for so many years, about the ignorance and the stupidity level of people in general. We live in a society where when you and I were young, I think I might be a little bit older than you. I'm right around John Stadtmiller's age. So I remember when I was in school, we were taught electricity, water, not a good combination, as well as other things, bad combinations. You don't mix bleach with ammonia and, you know, various different things we learned in school. We live in a society today where you have to have warning labels that say, don't put this plastic bag over your head, suffocation warning. Don't use the hairdryer in the shower. Danger of electrocuting yourself. Now we have to put warning labels on things like Tide laundry detergent because people are so stupid that they don't understand this is a lethal toxin. We live in a society of complete and utter idiots. I don't know how much more obvious this can become when we have to label every...
There's another factor out there. There's another factor out there. First of all, you know, there are people out there who know what they're doing is dangerous, but they're going to do it for their 15 minutes of YouTube fame. They want to be stars on YouTube.
I just moved about a month and a half ago, moved from Missouri back here to Georgia to take care of my elderly mom. When I was in Missouri, we're driving down the road. Now, this is Highway 63. It's a state highway. Some lanes, you know, some areas it's 2 lanes going in each direction. This allows a passing lane. You take a driver license test, even though you don't really need a driver license to travel, but that's another argument for another day. You take a driver license test, and on that test, in the book, it tells you about these 2 lanes passing and this, and that, and the other. But yet you've got to have a sign on the side of the road telling people, beware of left turning traffic in left lane. Well, no kidding, stupid. What did you think those people with the left turn signal are doing in the left lane at a crossway?
Okay, Art.
I mean, my God.
Art.
Put up signs for everything.
Art, the thing is the companies that make and install those signs are making a lot of money, and they're very generous donors to local city governments. And because a lot of this is not about the stupidity of people, but about lawyers and others who are trying to siphon off wealth from other people's labor. And yes, I understand that you'll get certain products and they'll be covered with all kinds of stickers of things that really should be obvious, but the reason is because somebody gets sued at some point, and then a lawyer will say to a company, well, we can reduce our liability exposure if we put the warning stickers all over the product. And it doesn't necessarily mean the people buying the product are idiots. It is simply some lawyer saying, better we have a sticker than we can go to court and say, look, we warned them when they did something stupid. So if anything, the stickers are really for the 1 or 2% who really are dumb enough to do things like go up on a ladder on just 1 foot.
Yeah, I just find it very frustrating to think about the fact that we live in a society where we have to label everything because somebody out there thinks that everybody's too stupid to figure this out. And my attitude is simple, like the lady that tried to sue McDonald's because she got burnt by a cup of hot coffee.
Yep.
Lady, you went in first in the morning, you bought a cup of coffee. Did you ask specifically for iced coffee? Did you not know it was going to come hot? And it says right on the lid there, warning, hot contents. Hello? Yes. How did this lady even get away with suing? So that argument in and of itself to absolve people from lawsuits fails because even with warning labels, people still do stupid things. I mean, we live in a society of complete idiots, Mike.
You know, you can't rule out the possibility that she went in there to get the coffee and deliberately spill it on herself so that she could sue. I mean, we had this story where, let's see, I'm looking for it, was just here. Al Sharpton's daughter, remember she slipped and fell on a sidewalk and sued New York for $5 million. And then right afterwards, she was photographed hiking in the Himalayas. Just like there are hate crime hoaxes, there are accident hoaxes. And it's a big problem for the court system. It's a big problem for the insurance companies, where people will fake an accident or an injury, figuring they're one lawsuit away from financial independence.
Well, you know, Mike, I understand what you're saying, and to a degree, I agree with you. I just find it very frustrating that we have people out there that are. Let me finish up.
Let me finish up with this other little story. There was a country in Europe, and I forget which one it was, and they tried a daring experiment, and that was they went on out and they took down all the traffic signs that they felt really weren't necessary. There were still a few that were necessary, and that what they found was that traffic safety improved. And what they figured out was that a big reason that there were car accidents were people were distracted trying to read all the signs that were on the side of the road, and they weren't paying attention to the car that was in front of them.
Oh, Lord have mercy. Well, yeah, I just find it frustrating to every time I think about these kind of things, and this tide thing just supports my argument that we live in a world of complete, utter idiots. And I find it very frustrating to think that, you know, I have to deal with these people. It's just very frustrating. I keep wondering, when am I going to actually run into some educated people who have a clue? Anyway, Mike, thanks a lot, man. Keep up the good work, and we'll talk another time.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. And, again, I think what's driving this fad, or what drove this fad, and will drive others like it, isn't because somebody just says, hey, this looks delicious, I'm going to eat it in the privacy of their own home. They're doing it on camera. They're doing it because they want to be YouTube stars. They want to have hits on their channel. And we've seen a lot of people do some very dangerous and dumb things. And if they get away with it, if they pull it off, yeah, they're a hit on YouTube. If they make a mistake, they're on their way to the hospital. But there are people who are desperate for that attention. and will do these things. All right, let's go to John in Alabama. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. I love the title of the show being called What Really Happened. And when I hear about the woman who spilled coffee from the McDonald's, I want to answer what really happened there. I'm familiar with the trial record and other things. The first thing was McDonald's had a policy that came out during the trial that they wanted to suppress people getting a free refill. And they did that by superheating the coffee. She went through the drive-thru to order her coffee. They gave her this super hot coffee, which most people do not get third-degree burns from coffee. She got third-degree burns in her groin. The burn center local burn centers had already been telling McDonald's, we don't know what you're doing, but you're injuring people. The jury, when she went and got treated, she approached McDonald's and said, I just want you to pay for the medical bill. McDonald's refused. So she's stuck with a medical bill for burns that she shouldn't have gotten. When McDonald's refused, she sued. The jury, upon hearing all the evidence, the $9 million everybody hears about, but the jury decided to punish McDonald's for serving this stuff for the sole purpose of saving 15 cents a cup because they don't have to give free refills then, because it'd be too hot to drink. They punished McDonald's by saying, we're going to charge you one refill for every cup of coffee you served in the past year in that district alone, and that came up to $9 million. When you hear the real facts of that trial, it sounds reasonable.
Well, the first thing that occurs to me is if this woman got her coffee at the drive-thru window, she's not coming back for a refill.
Exactly. So why did they give her the super hot stuff? That's what one of the trial questions the jury was irritated about.
Okay. I mean,
so I realize there's a lot of other. I happen to be a lawyer, and I realize.
Yeah, you do need to boil the water to make the coffee, and it only takes 140 degrees for water to be able to do a third-degree burn. You have to be exposed to it for 5 seconds. But again, you know, it just, given those facts, I can see that there really was a case there. But yeah, McDonald's definitely needed to get toned down on that one. Apparently, there's another lawsuit against McDonald's. Apparently, there is a certain way that they can hold those little cardboard boxes for the fries. There's a certain way they can hold them where when they fill them up, it's fewer potatoes. And by the time you get it in the bag and get it home, the box is sort of opened up fully, and you realize you don't have all the French fries you thought you had. But in this hard economy, corporations are doing things like that because every single penny counts. It can be the difference between success and failure. And McDonald's really isn't doing all that well right now. This attempt to upscale themselves with McCafe has failed. They turned off their existing base. And they tried to rebrand, and so they're actually in a little bit of trouble there. Okay?
But that's the thing. I always feel bad for her because she tried being so reasonable by just approaching them and saying, look, this is what the bill was to treat the burns. And they gave her the runaround, and they never would have even gone to court had they just said, you know, you're right, we did something here, we'll take care of it.
Yeah, well, that's typical corporate attitude toward a customer. And I've seen it in so many other places. It's like that story we did earlier about the Royal Bank of Scotland, where this bank boss is talking about the customers that went broke following RBS advice, and he said, let them just go hang themselves.
Well, geez. They were the ones, didn't they say last year they wanted everybody to sell out of stocks, too, because they thought a crash was imminent?
Well, I still think a crash is imminent. You know, everybody's doing whatever they can to hold it off, but it is imminent, and that's another reason why our government is trying to get the war well and truly going, so they've got something to blame the crash on.
Yes. Well, I hope it keeps not happening, because it seems like the attempts to get one going haven't been successful, but that's really not what we need. No,
it isn't, but again, all it's going to take is one false flag. Somebody fires a missile at Oahu, they blame it on North Korea. The U.S. is already in position to attack before anybody can say, wait a minute, let's make sure here. And when you look at how many wars have been started with false flags.
You remember the story years ago? This is, well, probably 3 or 4 years ago now, and one of the senators came out with it where they said that a nuclear warhead had been intended to be detonated in the U.S., but that there were people in the military that took it out to the Atlantic. It was during Obama's time. You know, and we talk about the false flags, and it's like there's a number of things thank God there's still some people with their heads screwed on straight that can influence things.
Yeah, there are some people in the rank and the file who are just going to say, no, I'm not going to be part of that. I'm not going to do that. I think you may be talking about that nuclear bomb that went missing from that plane from Minot Air Force Base. Anyway, listen, we have to take a break for commercials. John, thank you very much for the phone call and the update on the McDonald's case. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these words from our sponsors. Aloha America, welcome back to the show here. I'm already getting emails over the McDonald's lawsuit story. One of them says, millions of people use the drive-thru and do not get burned from coffee. Once the lady had the coffee in her hand, it was her responsibility to put it in the drink holder. That's a valid point. The woman has to take responsibility for the fact that she dropped the coffee. And let's see, we have this other one here. Watching an idiot walk out in front of a bus or blow-drying their hair in the shower is called Darwin taking out the trash. Speaking of Darwin and evolution, you probably heard of companies like Ancestry DNA, where like 23andMe, where you will basically send them, you spit in a test tube, you send it on in, and you find out more about yourself than probably you really wanted to learn. And apparently there's an issue about what they do with the DNA. And apparently reading the fine print, you know, Ancestry DNA is owned by the company behind the family tree website Ancestry.com, which we used to be members of. But apparently their privacy policy and terms of use agreement have been updated so it's easier to understand them. And buried within there is the claim that once you send your DNA to them, they own it. Now, what they're talking about is they're not owning all the DNA in your body. They're owning the information on the DNA in case there is something useful there, in case there is a unique gene that could be used to better the human race or to make the better soldier. Ancestry will have the right to basically carve it out of there and sell it to the appropriate customer and make a lot of money. And that's another reason not to be sharing your DNA with them. There's been a big stink lately where a lot of places, hospitals and so forth, they basically claim the intellectual property rights over whatever you leave behind, specifically that DNA, because there's big money in finding unique, useful genes. Huge amounts of money to be made. Okay, now apparently paleontologists over in Russia, in Siberia, have discovered a new species of 10-ton, 40-foot dinosaur. That's a big dinosaur. A lot of people are very concerned about China's out-of-control space station crashing back to Earth somewhere between March and April. Tremendous amount of concern that it is carrying as fuel a great deal of hydrazine, which is a very toxic, dangerous chemical. Now, presumably, if on reentry the tanks rupture, the hydrazine will decompose from the heat of reentry. But if any of the tanks were to survive intact, there's going to be a hazardous material issue wherever it lands. So they're still monitoring that, and like I said, it's going to come down a couple of months here. Story out of the Daily Mail in Great Britain. Apparently researchers in China have put forward a new idea to take care of space junk, which is becoming a major problem. They're claiming they're going to be able to use space-based lasers to basically zap large space junk into smaller space junk to make them a little less harmful. Also, I might add, impossible to track. All right, there's the music. Time for me to get on out of here. Please stay tuned for the John Stedmiller program. He's got lots of interesting things to share with you. We'll be back here tomorrow on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, take what you learn here, share it with other people. Just talk to people around you. We've got to stop this insane rush to war before we really do have a ballistic missile headed our way. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.